Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Environment and Climate Change Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Today we have 3 apologies from the Chairman, Mr. Robinson, and welcome to Mr. MacDonald, who is subbing in his place. We have apologies from Mr. Meelan, who is being subbed by Mr. Poland, and Mr. Bloxham, who is being subbed by Mr. Piper. Before we begin, can I please remind everyone to turn on their microphones when you wish or are invited to speak. So, agenda item 1. Minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of June 2025. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Do all agree? Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 2, question time. I have received one question from Mr. Starris. The question and response has been circulated to committee members and published online. As usual, the question and answer will be taken as read and there will be no discussion on the item. Mr. Starris has confirmed that he does not have a further supplementary question, and so this concludes this item, but I'd like to thank you, Mr. Starris, for his contribution. Agenda item 3, questions asked by members under standing orders 7.3 and 7.5. No such questions have been received. Agenda item 4, I have no urgent items. So agenda item 5, we have declarations of interest. Do any members have any declaration of interest they wish to declare? As none, thank you very much. Agenda item 6, declaration of the party whip. Do any members wish to declare the party whip? No, thank you. Agenda item 7, I have not received any petitions. That moves on to agenda item 8, Environment and Climate Change Performance Report to June 2025. Anne Carruthers, the Director of Environment and Transport, will introduce this item and is joined by Nicola from Corporate Resources. We've also been joined by lead member Mr. Tilbury. So welcome to this meeting. Anne, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And this report will bring 6 monthly to this committee, so you'll become quite familiar with it, I'm sure. And it provides a performance update to the quarter to the end of June. However, I will caveat it, some indicators are only, the data for that is only updated on an annual basis or more, so not all indicators are updated. There's quite a lot of information in it, and I'm proposing just to talk you through the indicators that have changed since our last one, and we'll go through the others as they change in future reports. However, at the end, we're very happy to try and answer your questions on any of the indicators or any of the performance, but I just wanted to put that parameter out there. In taking you through the report, I would suggest that you look at the dashboard A. That might be the easiest way to do it, because I'll kind of talk through those indicators that have changed. One other thing I will say before I start, we're including the waste indicators this time. You may be aware there is a proposal to move the waste remit and function to the Highways and Transport Committee. That hasn't happened yet. I understand it hopefully should be in place for next committee, i.e. the November one. But at the moment it still sits with this committee. That's why it's included in the update. And just one other thing before I start, if you're really interested in where the data comes from and the data source for each performance indicator, that's included in Appendix B of the report. Okay. The quartile position you can see on the dashboard there, the indicates for some of those there's a quartile position. What that reflects is our performance against 32 comparator county councils. So it gives you a bit of an indication of how we are doing relative to other authorities on that particular topic. Okay, so it's always a good one to have a look at just to measure that. And you will notice, I'm sure, that some of the indicators are more within our control or stroke influence, and some of them are ones that really we have very little influence on. The reason we report on those indicators are they are part of or contribute towards the wider environment strategy for the authority. So our environment strategy obviously thinks of all things environmental, and that doesn't necessarily just mean things within LCC's remit, but the wider environment of Leicestershire County, hence some of those wider indicators that we don't directly have an influence or control over. And that's indicated in the last column there by an L or a C. The C are the ones that we've got limited influence over, and the L were the ones that are more within our direct control, just in case you were wondering what they were. We have updated 12 indicators this time, so I'm going to just run you through them from the dashboard, okay? We've got electric vehicle infrastructure. That's the charging locations we've got. That's increased by 23% over the past year. And we are in the third quartile compared to those comparator councils across the country. We have, however, secured, you might be aware, just over 3 million of something called Levi funding. That's the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund from Department of Transport, and that is helping with our rollout of EV charge points on the public highway. It's specifically for charge points on the public highway, and in particularly residential areas where there is limited or no off-street parking, to allow residents to still, engage with or buy and have an electric vehicle, because we're providing some charging infrastructure for them. We also have, in terms of ultra-low emission vehicle ownership, that grew by 8% in the last reporting period, and 38% increase year on year, and that places Leicestershire in the second quartile nationally. Just for information, ultra low emission vehicles accounted for about 3.9, just under 4% of all licensed vehicles in the county, so still relatively low, but I think, as you'll see, we're beginning to see traction on that figure there. If I move on to renewable energy generation and capacity, that increased by 12% to nearly 400,000 megawatts in 2023, and capacity rose by 27%. And that, although the performance remains above average compared to other counties, it's still in the third quartile there. LCC's got limited influence over that, I'm sure you'll understand. And that data, actually, it's national data. It comes from DESNZ, Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, and it's 9 months in arrears. So we are going on that national data, but as I say, it's fairly, it is in arrears there. Energy efficiency of homes. All new homes, or nearly all new homes, 99% have an energy performance rating of C or higher. And that puts us in the top quartile. We do really well at that. But 54% of existing homes meet this standard. So, if it's an existing home, it's not new build, we've got 54% fall within that category of C or higher. What we'd say, however, is that data is derived from when a home is sold or leased, etc. So it's not definitive across 100% of the existing home stock. It's taken from when, a property changes hands in effect. But that will be the same nationally. So, there is that caveat to that. In terms of the things that will influence that, is things like our warm home service that's delivered through our public health department. So we do have some role in helping try to influence that indicator there. The council amount of renewable energy generated as a percentage of consumption, that increased by 3% to 21% in Q4 of 24-25, but it doesn't quite meet its target. The main contributors to this are the county hall biomass boiler and solar panels on the building as well. You're aware we've got those, so that all contributes into that, the amount of renewable energy we can generate. Greenhouse gas emissions from all sources in Leicestershire, that improved in performance. There's a 5% decline in that in 2023. It did just miss its target, but is above the national average. Just for your information, it covers emissions from industrial, commercial, public sector, domestic transport, land use, forestry, agriculture and waste management sectors. So really wide ranging in terms of that emissions. And again, that comes from national data and I think that is 2 years in arrear. When we look at the greenhouse gas emissions from all sources in Leicestershire per capita, when you look at it in that way, performance improved. There was a 6% decrease in that, which is really good news. And again, it's based on that national data we derive from government. More locally then, in terms of the County Council's business miles, that has improved. It's reduced from 4.7 million to 4.6 million miles to between quarters 3 and 4 of last year, and as well within its target. Just as a reminder, that is mileage carried out within the course of the job. It's not commuting to and from work. That is excluded. That's not about business mileage. This is purely mileage carried out in order to do the job. Okay. Tree planting. Really good news on the tree planting front. I'm sure you are aware that we have a target of planting 700,000 trees. It was by 2032. It was a 10-year period, and we're well ahead of our trajectory on that one. Nearly 500,000 trees have been planted since 2021, so we're doing well on that one. And moving on to the last group then, waste. And in terms of performance there, on the percentage household waste sent for reuse, recycling or composting, that's remained steady at 44% and just below the 45% target. Waste sent to landfill is decreased slightly, which is good, just below, I think it's 11%, and just narrowly missing its target. But not far off it at all. And household waste per household remains in quarter 3, and is only marginally higher than the previous reported target. As I say, I've focused on the indicators that have moved since the last reporting period. However, happy to take questions on the other indicators, and myself and Joe will do and Nicola will do our best to answer your questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. And sorry, Joe, I forgot to say hello to you when you go. Mr. Tilbury, is there anything you want to add onto this item at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say, it's great to hear we're exceeding expectations in planting the 700,000 trees. Planting trees in specific areas acts as natural flood defences. It's a benefit to wellness and it improves air quality. Let's beat that 2032 mark and get the 700,000 as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. Do members have any questions? Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. One's a comment, if I can, and the other one's a question to Anne as well. So firstly, the comment, I echo what Adam's just said about the tree planting. I think obviously the last administration over the 4 years, planting 1 tree for every resident was in Leicestershire was one of our key objectives, and we almost made it, and it's glad to see now that we are almost there. Had we become the administration this time round, we were proposing that we were going to plant 1 million trees. I'd like to have a discussion with you at some point, if that's okay as lead member, because I think that's something that your administration should really take forward. Can I respond, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd love a meeting, Craig. I'd pretty much say that. We'd love to do that. Thank you. Excellent. And then on to the question, which is about the amount of energy renewable generated as a percentage of consumption. I know, Anne, you alluded to being 21%, a rise of 3%, but it's still some way short of the 34. What's the sort of key barriers that's stopping us achieving that? Thank you.
That one, I think, if I'm right, is about our own buildings there and what we can generate ourselves as LCC. So, we have done things like, we've got the biomass boiler, so that there's a limit to what that can achieve in itself. We've got our solar panels. I know we're looking, for instance, if we can put solar panels on schools where that's feasible to do to expand that. So sorry, in terms of the barriers, it's our ability to up those kind of interventions within our own stock. But we are constantly looking, and there's a team in Corporate Resources Department which is focused on, or part of its work is focused on looking at that. It's financially being able to do that, having the right building stock in order to be able to do that, and the overall capacity and able to up that element of it. I wouldn't like to say it's not my area of expertise. I think some of our colleagues within Corporate Resources would be better placed. However, my understanding is the targets are set. They're something that we think is ambitious but achievable. So I would hope it would be achievable, but you know, they would be the experts.
Thank you. Mr. Piper?
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Mr. Smith's comment there about solar panels, have you considered, whilst you're looking at putting them on the roofs of buildings, putting them actually covering car parks with them, parking spaces, so that the cars actually park underneath them? When you consider the acreage of the parking, which is around this building alone, that would produce a lot more electricity. Also, what it could do is it could help shelter the cars so that you need less energy and air conditioning to cool them down in the summer and less heating to get rid of all the ice in the winter.
Sorry,
Yeah, so please, Joe.
Through you, Chair. All I'm aware of is certainly, and we could get a more detailed response from Property Services, is there have definitely been discussions. They've looked at models elsewhere where they've seen solar displays as car parking cover. I think it ultimately would come down to cost. It's that level of investment or the return on the investment. So I think going back to Anne's earlier point about the target and it being realistic, it's always subject to funding or funding sources or the return on that investment over whatever time frame that they would look at. So it is definitely something I know colleagues in property are aware of as a potential opportunity. I think it would come down to whether there's a funding source. And an example I would give of that is in the last year, they bid into the public sector decarbonisation fund to look at whether end-of-life gas boilers, we could replace them with air source heat pumps, etc. Because there's funding available. If we put in a small amount and we're successful, they'll top that up. So it's just, I would argue it's less about the technology, it's more about the financial viability.
Mr. Poland?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I think it might be the first point that was discussed, electric vehicle charging locations per 100,000 population. Is that the one where it's on street parking and that one? Yeah. So if we're third quartile, which authorities are sort of the leading authorities in that regard? What are they doing that we don't? And is there anything we can sort of replicate from that? I don't claim to be any sort of subject matter expert in this area, but it strikes me that a lot of places are going to be constrained by the nature, just by the nature of the design. So high-rise buildings, people who live in terrace houses and so forth, and sort of with the best will in the world, no amount of on-street parking, unless you're going to give one per house, is going to overcome that. So we'll hit a point, I guess, where that's going to be an insurmountable barrier. But if we are third, what are the best authorities doing in that regard?
I think, unfortunately, it's going to be a similar answer as the previous one. I think the biggest barrier is the funding. Now, the authorities are in the fortunate position to have funding to invest themselves, have probably got there earlier. I'm sorry, I have to face up, I can't quote which ones they are, name specific authorities. However, what I'd say is, with the Levi funding we've got, this 3.14 million, we're now in a position to roll out an awful lot more throughout, well, not more, an awful lot, because we have no charging points on the public highway. Yes, they'll be on private car parks, or there might be in district council car parks or supermarket car parks, that kind of thing, but we don't have any on the public highway. So, and we're only now at the beginning of rolling those out, the very first ones. So going through that programme is going to significantly increase our position on this one, and the reason we haven't done it before is we as an authority have not had the funding. We've had the ability through Midlands Connect, which is a sub-national transport body covering the Midlands. We've gone with a number of other authorities, and we're in a consortium that is bid for and drawing down that funding, and that will help take us all forward. Purely has been the financial constraints. We have not had money to invest in that.
Yes, Mr. Poland.
Thank you. I think we did some work on this some time ago, a year or so ago, I can't remember, but do we know what the demand would be for public on the street public charging points? And do we know if that's sort of focused in one particular area, or would it be more general?
It's quite a difficult one, because obviously, one, we're working to predictions, say, for where the EV market's going to go and where you get demand. But the other thing I would say is, as part of this scheme, obviously we have to decide where we're going to put them. And the first thing we did was a kind of large scale public engagement exercise on something called Social Pinpoint, which is a kind of online platform, geographic based. And literally we went out to communities and we said, tell us where you think there's a need for them. And that in itself is about driving the communities and the population telling us, well, actually, this is an area, I live in this area, there isn't something, you know, obviously I'm interested in this. And that in some ways, it's not a guarantee, but it's an indication there is a demand for. And if something, you know, these things, often you get a critical mass, don't you? You get a tipping point, and both the EV market and that drives demand as well. And then there'll be the other issue of, do we have enough, exactly as you say? But equally, this is an area we know technology is moving on all the time. You know, with the current ban on, ban on manufacture of new petrol and diesel vehicles, at some point in the future, fuel stations are going to have to change, aren't they? You know, and there may come the time, instead of taking 5 minutes to go and fill up with diesel or petrol, it might be 5 minutes to electric charge a car, or 10 minutes. You know, you can do the rapid ones at the service stations, etc. There'll be the model will keep changing. But this is at the moment, to the way the market is, to try and help people in residential areas where they don't have off-street parking, so they've got an opportunity to charge if they want to engage with the EV market. Sorry, I've just been informed as well, those authorities that are doing well and ahead, Shropshire and Cornwall.
You want to come in there, Nicola? You want?
Yeah, just for the most recent data, it is Cornwall, Northumberland and Shropshire that are doing high performing, but they are also high spending. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? I've just got one I'm going to ask. On street charging, now a lot of people, when you buy an electric vehicle, get a subsidy towards putting electric vehicle charging points in. If that was the case, you lived in a place where you had to put it on street, could that subsidy go towards the authority, being us, to help them put that on-street charger in? Would that be a possible thing? What could happen?
I'm not sure where the subsidies are you're coming from. I mean, I know, for instance, like energy companies like Octopus, if you buy an EV with them, for some models of their car, they will put in your home charging point, etc. That's obviously private sector money. And I know government keep coming out with new grant aiding for things like that. However, what I would say is, I doubt that would be the case, because things like that Levi funding is already funding coming from government. It's direct grant funding for government for us to put in charging points on the highway. Therefore, you know, any other public money that's going to a different market, like the individual householder, etc., to encourage them. So I would tend to think that they've allocated their money. This is for local authorities to help kickstart the provision of the infrastructure that's needed in that way. And there's other things, incentives that are going to other parts of, you know, the community in order to, you know, try and support the EV kind of rollout that government is behind.
Thank you. Any further questions, Ms. Gray?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a point that I wanted to make related to air quality. I noticed in the report that we have exceeded WHO guidelines on PM 2.5, and obviously there is a bill going through at the moment that Parliament are considering, which would make those guidelines something that authorities would need to comply with if that goes through. And I was thinking in relation to that about the importance of joined up routes for active travel. You know, there's a mention here about the Clean Air Day, which is absolutely brilliant. And, you know, clearly many residents have indicated they would like to be able to walk, cycle. I've got residents contacting me, but one of the big barriers, I think, is that often routes don't join up, aren't attractive, aren't safe. So I just want some assurance, really. I realise that falls within the highways team, but that we are sort of looking at that we are, you know, really proactively thinking about what can be done around that.
No, thanks very much. And with my highways hat on then, I'll give you an answer to that one, if that's all right. Yeah, we are doing a lot of activity in that. And yeah, I mean, there is a challenge. You can't deliver everything at once. It's always got to be delivered in stage. So you'll never have the whole complete network you'd ever want out there right at this moment, or what any one moment, will you? What we're doing on that is a number of funds. We have got funding coming through from Active Travel England, which is specifically for this area, which is really, really good. We have also got something called the Local Transport Grant Funding, which is, and we've been given a 4-year, first time government, a DFT, have ever put out a 4-year settlement in any funding thing for local authorities. All local authorities got it. And that is for highway and transport improvements. An element of that will go into sustainable travel and active travel, walking and cycling. And what we're doing specifically in areas, we have for a number of areas, local cycling and walking infrastructure plans. LC WIPs is a natty anagram on that one. And they are about actually what we want to see for that walking and cycling network in Loughborough, you know, whatever town it is, Melton, etc. So that either with the active travel funding or the LT, whatever funding we've got, and when developments come along, we know what we're asking for. We want a contribution to walking and cycling. It can go to this network connection, etc. So actually that makes it much easier to make the case for the money, the development sector as well. That's not all the answer, but it's just part of the jigsaw. And one other thing you might have noticed, we've got a report going to Cabinet coming up that discusses the next stage of our something called our Enabling Transport Choices Strategy, and something we love acronyms, don't we, in the transport world, MAPES, multimodal area investment plans. And the first one, one of the first ones we're doing is for the harbour area, and that really is looking at all modes of travel within a really specified geographic area and what needs to happen in that. And again, it's about identifying what you want to do with public transport, with road improvements, with walking and cycling. And again, it's that detail, so that when we have funding opportunities, we know what our priorities are and we're going to deliver in a joined up way as much as we can. Sorry, that was a bit of a rattle through. I hope that helped.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? No? Oh, I'd like to say thank you, Anne, Joe and Nicole, for that then, please. This report is an update for us to note. The committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes if everyone's agreed with that. Thank you very much. So then we're on to agenda item 9, which is the second and final substantive item on today's agenda, which is a report on the annual review of Leicestershire County Parks, which is on pages 37 to 42 of your agenda pack. Richard Hunt, Head of Catering, Hospitality and Country Parks, will present this report. Over to you, please, Richard.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me this afternoon. This report covers the annual review of the county's country parks service. I'm conscious that this is a new committee, and this is the first time that I've spoken in front of this committee. I thought it might be worthwhile to start with a brief overview of the service. Leicestershire County Council is fortunate to have 18 parks and open spaces in our portfolio, covering over 530 hectares of land within the county. And these include some of Leicestershire's most loved and visited sites, such as Beacon Hill Country Park, Bosworth Battlefield, Market Bosworth Country Park, Watermead, Snibston Colliery Park and Borough Hill, to name just a handful of my favourites. But they also include many smaller sites, perhaps less well visited, but no less significant, both for access to green space that they offer to local residents, but also for their wildlife amenity value and biodiversity value that they offer to all of us. The service covering these 18 sites is staffed by 14 rangers and supported by over 174 volunteers who give of their time to help us in the management of these sites. This year marked the 50th anniversary of the Country Parks service from when the first parks were given to the county or acquired by the county back in the 1970s. The report looks at both visitor numbers on our sites as well as our events, activities and work supporting nature and biodiversity. And it also looks forward to the work that's taking place in this year in 2025. So visitor numbers in 2024 were really strong, and they continued the trend that we've seen since COVID of greatly increased visitor numbers, and that's been really gratifying to see. And it's worth seeing that the numbers set out in point 7 of the report in reality only cover a proportion of the visitors to our country parks, because they only cover the number of vehicles that are entering our parks, because that's the thing we can most easily measure. And so there will consequently be many, many more visits that are being undertaken on foot by visitors, or also onto those sites for which we don't have car parking infrastructure or don't have the mechanism to monitor car numbers. So in reality, numbers are substantially higher than we see even here. The one site where it's clear that numbers have dropped is at Watermead Country Park. In reality, numbers have still remained very, very robust on that site. But as the paper notes, the car parking system has been awaiting replacement since it was vandalised. We've taken the opportunity during that process to replace the system entirely and move to an automatic number plate recognition system rather than the previous pay on entry system. This should give a much better visitor experience going forwards. It's necessitated completely new hardware and a completely new phone connection, which has been delayed in the process of being installed. However, I am pleased to say that we are in the final stages of install, and it should be operational very, very shortly. Watermead is a tricky park, as the paper makes clear. Flooding continued to be really problematic in the winter of 2024. And although the flood events were less significant than the previous year, 9 flood events was still enormous. And the paper notes the amount of flood-related rubbish that rangers have to remove from the site after every inundation that the site receives. We've taken the opportunity over the year to upgrade facilities in a number of our parks, including working with the National Forest Company, who've provided some funding to enable us to upgrade paths in the heart of the National Forest area, which are a significant improvement and make them much more accessible to more people. We've also added a new dog wash facility at Market Bosworth Country Park, which has proved very popular with users. And our events programme continues throughout the year with walks and talks led by our rangers and our volunteers and third-party organisations on our sites, and sessions for children and families. And I was particularly pleased to see the return this year of the very popular Up to the Beacon sculpture trail, which you can still catch if you go to the upper car park at Beacon Hill Country Park until later this month, and it's well worth a visit. Environmental management continues across all of our sites, including rhododendron management at Beacon Hill Country Park to help us preserve the heathland environment there, and also restoring ponds across a number of our parks. And our woodland management programme that's been running now for a number of years with support through the Countryside Stewardship Woodland Improvement Grants. We've also come to the completion of a project with the Trent Rivers Trust at Beacon Hill Country Park around natural flood management. And if you have the opportunity to visit that park, it's well worth looking out for the works and some of the interpretation around them to see what's been achieved there and how, as well as improving habitat for wildlife, it's allowed us to help mitigate flooding downstream within the catchment area. So there's lots of detail in the report, but I'll probably end my comments at that point. But obviously happy through you, Mr. Chairman, to take any questions on the report or the service more generally.
Thank you. I'm lucky I can say I'm one of the people to actually welcome you back. I was on this committee for the last 4 years. It's good to see this still progressing. Ms. Tilbury, do you have any comments on this report, please?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I'd like to echo Richard's points, actually, firstly. If anyone wants to see how natural flood defences work, pop down to Beacon Hill. It is amazing what they're doing. It really is increasing biodiversity in the area, and hopefully it will stop the flooding down on the Soar Valley as well, which is fantastic. A couple of questions, Richard, if you don't mind. When you say the Watermead parking situation will be fixed, you said soon. How soon are we talking?
I know that the next stage of connectivity works is to be done the week after next, because that's now booked in with data I've seen, and I believe there's 2 further stages after that, and we should be ready to go. I am hoping for a date in October, but it's not entirely within my gift because there's third-party contractors having to do the work, but it is very, very close to completion now.
Thank you. And just one last question, is that okay? Thank you. So we're talking about expanding what might have already happened at the cafe at Beacon Hill. Is there any other ways we're looking to generate money at the country parks to facilitate their continuing great service and presentation? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the commercial strategy for country parks is something we've worked on a lot over recent years, and the amount of income coming into the service has substantially increased. Partly that's been through making sure that we continually review our concession arrangements, our catering arrangements on parks, also looking at car parking where that's appropriate to charge for and how we go about charging for that. What partners we license to use parks for activities and things like that. So it's always something that the service is looking to explore and kind of keep in balance alongside a lot of the biodiversity work they have to do and the public access work that we have to do. But certainly commercial revenue generation is part of that. And, you know, we were delighted to be able to be working with a new partner in the cafe at Beacon Hill as, you know, part of improving the offer to visitors and making our parks more sustainable in the future.
Thank you for that. So last question, Dr. Hill, please.
Thank you, Chair. Watermead Park's flooded forever. When I was at university, we did a management plan for it. My scurrilous suggestion became law in the university afterwards that I suggested we turn it into a Tesco's. I wasn't joking, but some people believed I was serious. But anyway, that's an aside. Maybe we shouldn't actually look at the flooding as a problem and look at it as an opportunity, because it is also contributing to flooding elsewhere in terms of prevention, because it floods there. And maybe we should embrace that somehow. I'm not sure how. And I think the Country Parks website saying a park on your doorstep, it's a tad disingenuous for people in my part of the world where it's a good 40-minute drive each way to the nearest county country park, because Harborough, quarter of the county, doesn't have a single country park. Thank you, Chair.
I think that was rather more of a statement than a question there, John. So thank you for that. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report, Richard. Congratulations on marking your 50th anniversary. You certainly don't look it, but looking ahead to the next 50 years, and I know you and I have had several discussions on this subject before, I'm very fortunate that we do have a country park in my division, Snibston Colliery Park. Fantastic facility, and if members haven't been, I do heartily recommend you go onto it and the tours as well. That's my plug. But there is also an awful lot of empty buildings on that particular park that could be utilised for extra rental yield. And again, I know we have talked about this at length in the past. But what I want to ask you today is more about third-party activities at the park. Recently, and this is across all the country parks as well, recently at Snibston there's been a lot more and they've been incredibly successful. We had one this past weekend. Unfortunately, I didn't make it myself, but I've seen the reports and it was absolutely packed. It was very, very well attended. I'm constantly approached as local member for the facilities. Are they open to the public to use them for different events? When we pass it on and ask for these things, there seems to be an awful lot of barriers in the way. Now, the more events, in my eyes, the more events that we have, the less crime and vandalism we're going to have, because they're busy and people prevent vandalism. But also things like the cafe on site and the tours and everything else benefits directly from having more and more events. What can we do as an authority to make it easier for people to bring these third-party events to us so that we can fully utilise the facilities that we've got? Thank you.
Thank you. The event at the weekend at Snibston was an event in conjunction with the Leicester Transport Heritage Trust, who bought a large number of vintage buses to Snibston Colliery Park. And Mr. Smith is absolutely correct that the park was packed with families enjoying rides on historic buses from between Snibston and Ashby. That kind of third-party link with the Transport Heritage Trust is something we've been able to host them twice now at Snibston, and it's been fantastically successful on both occasions. And as we set out to members at the start, with a team of 14 rangers, we cannot be delivering everything on parks in terms of large scale events and activities. So working in conjunction with partners is really, really important. Snibston's a great example where there are organisations we've been able to work with there. The Snibston Heritage Trust that we work with in order to deliver tours and events for visitors is also a really good partnership on that site. It's something where we as a team can be working to make sure we reduce the barriers as much as possible for third-party groups who want to hire the site. And I think partly it's about, engagement early on so that we can plan and we can make sure we've got the right infrastructure in there and that we're booking it on times when, again, we can get that balance, as we talked a bit about earlier, between kind of public access on days when it can work, when we know that there's not other things happening. So I'd encourage people who are interested in doing activity with to contact us well in advance, so we've got that time to be able to plan together, and so that we can get appropriate events that will be really successful on our sites.
Thank you. And obviously, like I say, I have lots of members of different groups in the area asking me for this. Who are they best to contact? Is it yourself directly?
They're welcome to contact us through either the contact details on the Country Parks website or the Country Parks generic email address, which is countryparks@leics, or ideally, or they can contact myself as well.
Thank you for that. Mr. Poland.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions, if that's okay. First of all, to do with Watermead. Obviously, the figures are drastically impacted in 2024 for the reasons you've outlined. And I guess it's positive that we're taking the opportunity to sort of upgrade the system now. What have we got in place in order to stop future vandalism, to ensure we're not sort of back in this position in 6 months, a year, whenever it is? And so as a side point on the subject of flooding, I agree with Dr. Hill's comments about flooding the park is probably preferable, obviously, to flooding of other areas. And they've been walking distance of Watermead Park, and it, as you said, is always flooded. And appreciate I don't have a dog or anything, but it doesn't ruin my life when it does flood. But what I would say, in fairness, is a few years ago they upgraded, they put tarmac on for the footpaths, and that was an absolute game changer, because it went from being, a few weeks or months of it was out of action to actually just a relatively short period of time. So that was a very, very positive improvement for the site. So that's my first question around the future of sort of stopping vandalism. Second one, separately, is to do with visitor numbers at Beacon Hill. It's quite interesting. You can almost see a story with the visitor numbers there, can't you? So you've got 2019 106,000, which goes up by the better part of 50,000 in a year, which is presumably because of COVID, and then stays at that number except for 2022 and 23 before recovering to that sort of figures in 2024. What happened in 2022 and 23? Do we know why there was a drop of sort of 20,000? And then it's recovered? Is there something we've done? Do we know why that is? They're my two questions.
Thank you. So at Watermead, around the car parking system and vandalism, the change of system that we're using should significantly reduce the likelihood of vandalism, because there won't be anything worth stealing within the system. So that was partly why, again, we wanted to look to have a different system. Watermead is quite an isolated site, so actually we needed a system that would be appropriate there. So I'm confident the new system is not going to be a target for thieves with what's going in there. And I think people are right with Watermead around the fact that it is a site that is intended to flood, being where it is on the floodplain. And I think where things have been different in recent years, and particularly challenging, is that flooding has prevented all access to the site, which is where it's been different to, as you say, it's flooded for ever because that's what it's meant to do, but rarely to the point where we've had to actually close the site off to residents because you can't even drive through the main entrance because of the floodwaters. And that has marked a change, and we are starting to see damage to infrastructure caused by flooding, which wouldn't have had before. So I think it was in last year's report we reported that entire layers of tarmac had been removed by the force of floodwater and floated downstream. It's things like that that the team are having to deal deal with, which you wouldn't have had to do in the past. At Beacon Hill, the numbers are really interesting. The change in 2019 was driven by a couple of things. Actually, the biggest increase there came from us introducing the cafe at Beacon Hill at the lower car park, and that was a real success and continues to be a success at Beacon Hill. And so actually visitor numbers had increased massively pre-COVID, but in that very short window between the autumn of 2019 when the cafe opened and then March 2020 when the park had to be closed for a period. Beacon Hill is a site that's quite heavily affected by weather. And so we have seen poorer years for visitor numbers, partly driven by the weather. Beacon's also a site where actually last year's numbers were probably really very good and almost bucking a trend in some ways. A lot of our sites, what we've seen, I think it's probably best to view it this way, that actually we had a post-COVID or a COVID and post-COVID massive spike on country parks, and on most sites it's tailed off. So Beacon Hill, it tailed off in 2022 and 2023, still to numbers vastly in excess of pre-COVID. And it's wonderful to have so many people having discovered that site and continue to attend that site. So actually 2024 has been a bit of a blip, which is really welcome, and I think shows activity happening on site, and also that the weather's been really good and so people were happy to come. The site that's actually really gratifying in terms of its numbers is Market Bosworth Country Park, where numbers haven't really dropped off at all post-COVID. And actually, I think a lot of people discovered that site and have continued to come to that site post-COVID, which is really lovely to see. So yeah, some sort of nuance to those numbers, but broadly speaking, absolutely as you set out.
Thank you, appreciate it, and thank you very much for the responses there. I guess the answer to this is going to be no, but I'll ask anyway. The Watermead car park numbers, presumably that doesn't include the city's figures. So obviously, the Watermead is over a boundary, isn't it? And the part I go to, I think it's actually more in the city. I know there's a big car park there, so I guess that might sort of, the numbers might be bigger than that might be indicate. And just to sort of more of a comment than a question, in terms of the flooding getting worse at Watermead, indeed, I think that's a story across the county, actually. I mean, certainly in my own division, flooding is worse. Each year it seems to be worse than the previous year. So it's possibly part of a wider change.
Yeah, so I can confirm the numbers are only on the county side of Watermead. Obviously, to residents, Watermead feels like one park, and our signage and things like that is harmonised across the city and county side, so it keeps that feel of one park, albeit it is actually two separate halves to the park.
Thank you. Ms Pendlebury.
Thank you, Chair. It's really on item 29. Firstly, congratulations to everyone involved who achieved the Green Flag Award for accessibility, particularly Market Bosworth, as that's the one I use. Just on the 1485 sculpture trail on the Battlefield site, I believe that was funded by the Enterprise Partnership, Hinckley and Bosworth Lottery, Heritage Fund and the Dixie. Did LCC give anything towards that? And if they're involved, are they doing anything towards making that site accessible for people with limited mobility?
Thank you. It wasn't actually something that fell within country parks, so it wasn't something that my service was responsible for as a project. So I'm not entirely sure around the funding arrangements. Certainly, as you say, it was commissioned by the Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council and Leicestershire Promotions. I know, I think Rights of Way were heavily involved in marking out the trail and working out where it would go, so that was intended to be as accessible as possible. And it is marketed as a walking trail for people to take part in. We are responsible for managing the footpaths around the Bosworth Battlefield Centre that forms part of that route as well. So we have an involvement in it there. It's great to be able to see the installation at the Battlefield Centre, which, if members haven't been able to see, is definitely well worth a trip and is really striking addition to that centre there. So a limited involvement for country parks, but we've been delighted to be able to assist on getting people between those sites where it crosses our bits of land.
Ms Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to first of all pass on thanks from residents who've contacted me, members of sporting groups, running groups, walking groups, about the improvements to the footpath over at Broombriggs. Much appreciated. And I wondered if there were any plans to improve footpaths through Jubilee Woods, which can be quite difficult to access, particularly over the winter months.
Thank you. And it's nice to get some feedback about Broombriggs Farm, and I'm glad the paths have been well received. Jubilee Woods is a wonderful site, and it is access. It's a site where we aim to balance the fact that as a less utilised site, it is an incredible resource for nature. So at the moment, we don't have plans to substantially upgrade the access into Jubilee Wood, because we're trying to get that balance between access and ensuring there is that space for nature to thrive. Some of the woodland in Jubilee Wood is some of our kind of most untouched within the Country Parks estate. So again, some of these balances that we're having to make as a service between public access and nature conservation are well encapsulated within Jubilee Wood. So at the moment, there are no plans for us making substantial alterations to paths and things like that.
I can completely appreciate that. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I agree there's a balance to be struck. What I've noticed sometimes is it has, I think, attracted an increase, as we've seen since COVID, an increase in dog walkers and so on. And so often when those kind of very informal footpaths that are sort of the main way through are quite flooded, people are sort of trampling all over, you know, and it's that balance again, isn't it, between some level of access but not wanting to damage that balance with conservation. So that was really what prompted my question. I can totally understand your response.
Mr. Piper.
Thank you, Chair. Well, one comment, first of all, I think to Dr. Hill about, unfortunately, she may not have parks, but she does have 2 Tesco's in Market Harbour. But presumably the buildings at Snibston, which are not in use, are not suitable. This is not aimed at you, it's probably aimed at the previous presentation, be suitable for solar panels. But more importantly, and to you, Richard, is do you do any wildflowering planting in the country parks?
Yes, I can. So grassland management is something that takes place across a number of our parks. So there are some particularly stunning displays of wildflowers just going over at the moment at Market Bosworth Country Park, which are well worth going to see. Also, some extensive wildflower meadows that we manage at Beacon Hill Country Park, and a number across some of the sites within the heart of the National Forest. So it's something that we're doing and something we're looking to expand as well, with grassland being one of the sort of priority areas within local nature recovery strategies and things like that. So it's something that we are looking to improve grassland management where possible across our sites.
Thank you very much.
Don't know if either you want to pick up on the comment about the solar panels on the buildings. I mean, I imagine it's quite a simple answer.
No, I can probably pick that up to some extent. Snibston is a very complicated site from the nature of the buildings, the age of the buildings, and the listed status of the buildings. So whilst I can absolutely see why those sites could be perfect on one measure, as a scheduled monument for part of the site, which is the very highest level of protection, and then a number of the other buildings being listed buildings, it does somewhat restrict where we can place solar panels on that site.
Thank you for that. Any of the members have any further questions? No, that's wonderful. So once again, I'd like to say thank you very much for that report. And like the previous report, this is an update for us to note. The committee comments will be recorded in the minutes. Everyone's agreed with that. So that takes on to agenda item 10, date of the next meeting, which is scheduled to take place on the 12th of November 2025 at 2 p.m. in this same room. Agenda item 11, as stated at the start of the meeting, I have no urgent items. So I'd just like to say thank you to members, officers, anyone watching the live stream, and that concludes today's meeting. Thank you.